Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Soccer Morning. Jason Davis here with you. Happy Soccer Morning. Happy Soccer Friday morning. We are one day away from the beginning of the MLS season. You can feel the buzz in the air, at least in my general, like a 5-foot radius around me. That's where you can feel it. I'm not sure you guys can feel it through the microphone or the camera, but it's there. And if you're an MLS fan, I'm sure you're ready. It's a long winter. Jurgen Klinsmann thinks it's a long winter. It feels like a long winter. We are finally here, ready to start a new MLS campaign. The 19th MLS campaign. It's a landmark campaign for a lot of reasons. Big signings in the offseason. Lots of buzz around expansion, whether those teams are in or not. No expansion teams this year, but we're on the verge of adding some teams. Lots to talk about in New York and LA. DC United trying to fix their team while pushing for a stadium. TV deals all over the place, pissing people off. It's not fun times in Crewland right now. If you haven't heard, the Columbus Crew have signed a TV deal with Time Warner Sports, which apparently is only available on Time Warner Cable, which apparently only certain Columbus Crew fans get. Not everybody gets it. And they have not lifted the blackout rule on MLS Live 75 miles from the stadium. So, Crew fans, unhappy today. And I feel for you. And it's just one of those small things. It's not small to Crew fans. Small in the grand scheme. That shows you where this league and this sport is in this country. Because you can never get away from the constant discussion as to whether soccer is major, MLS is major, what counts as major, is that major, who cares, who should care, here's why you shouldn't care. People writing 2,000-word articles on why you should ignore MLS. Here's the MLS season, about to get underway, people, and it sucks and you shouldn't pay attention. People writing that article out there, causing a furor. Furor. Is that how you say that word? Causing a furor. In the Twitter community, at least, I'm sure MLS fans all over the place who partake of the website that posted this 2,000-word hate piece were upset. Absolutely, understandably upset. What's the deal? You come in and you feel the need to piss on my league. Why? Because it's not La Liga? Because it's not the Premier League? Okay. And I'm not really going to get into the nitty-gritty of said piece. I haven't identified where it came from because it's not worth your time. It's really not. If you're an MLS fan, it's not worth your time. If you are not an MLS fan, if you enjoy hating on MLS, be free. Go read it. It'll just feed you where you're hungry because you already have your attitude in place. It's fun. And here's the thing about that. You don't like MLS? That's your decision. That's fine. Go for it. Have fun with La Liga and the Premier League and the Bundesliga. That's absolutely your right as a soccer fan to turn your nose up at MLS. It's fine. And MLS fans need to get over, and I've been working on this for years, people. This is ongoing therapy for me as well. MLS fans need to get over the need for validation. Your league is here. Your teams are here. We're approaching 2 decades. Chill out. Let it go. That site wants to hate on your league. Let them do it. Hey, maybe it has some impact. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it keeps a couple of those people more tuned into Europe away from MLS for a little while longer. Eventually they'll come around, and even if they don't, your league's not going anywhere. Your teams are doing well for the most part. Care about your local team. Care about the players you signed. Look forward to the season. Don't let that guy piss you off because he decided he was in a hateful mood. Because he gets to be the arbitrator of what's good soccer and what's not. What's entertaining soccer and what's not. What's worth your time and what's not. That's the thing, right? And look, I know part of this is MLS fans are obnoxious. Find me a sport where the fans aren't obnoxious. Find me that sport, because I don't think it exists. MLS fans may have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They may be obnoxious in some ways. Some of them may be posers in some classical sense. I don't care. I don't care. That's not the issue we should be worried about, whether some website hates on the league. Because they don't need the validation anymore. Don't need it. Don't need to be worried about whether or not the league is major anymore. Don't need it. To that point, don't need Jose Mourinho to make us feel better about American soccer. And this is not really a criticism of Jose, because this is what he's going to do. Jose Mourinho was named the global football ambassador for Yahoo Sports. Jose Mourinho, global football ambassador, Yahoo Sports. Now, this means that he has done videos talking about various soccer subjects. I think at one point he said, England can win the World Cup. They have the talent. They have the ability. England can do it. Does he really believe it? I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Here's what he said about U.S. soccer. Despite the team not being incredibly talented, here's the quote. I see the American team, obviously not with incredible talent, but they have some good players playing in Europe and some good players in MLS that is coming up day by day. So I think they are ready to create problems, like they create problems to Portugal because they beat us in another World Cup in 2002, obviously. Now, he talks about Jurgen Klinsmann and his respect there, talks about Bob Bradley. This is all very nice. It's nice. Now, just what I want us to do is to put it in the proper context. Jose Mourinho, global football ambassador for Yahoo Sports, saying nice things. Every time a big European football figure comes to the United States on a preseason tour or for a book deal or whatever, do you think it's in their best interest when talking to American reporters in America to say, you know what? American soccer is crap. You guys aren't ready yet. Yeah, okay, you're trying real hard. We get it. You're not ready for this. No, of course not. And I'm not, again, perhaps Jose Mourinho is being completely honest here. Perhaps he is. I don't think it matters either way. Let's not put more into what this is than what it is. The same goes for that article. You don't need the validation. You don't need Jose Mourinho's validation. You don't need that website's validation. And I know it's kind of petty of me not to even mention the site, but if you paid attention to Twitter last night, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't need me to say it. You don't need me to say it. The game is here. The game's not going anywhere. And now today, a new report from Rich Luker, who runs a social sports data company, Trends and the like. Roger Bennett writes at ESPN FC, does Men in Blazers, has a story today from kids from 12 to 17 care as much about MLS as they do about Major League Baseball. Hooray! That's good stuff. That's a good sign for the future. So there you go. There's your validation. You actually need it. You want it. There it is. In numbers, in data. Not because somebody told you that your league matters. Don't need that. All right. It's enough of this. Enough. Let's take a break. When we come back, excited for this. Danny Carbassione, an Arsenal scout in America, founder of Soccer Without Limits, SWOL.net, will join us. We'll talk about scouting, player development, all of that. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
On the phone line with me now, Danny Carasciun, former Arsenal player, current scout in America for his former club, and founder of Soccer Without Limits, which is SWOL, swole.co, not .net. Ignore my last thing. It's co, swole.co. Danny, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. Thanks for taking some time. So we got you on here. This is we're constantly talking about the growth of the game in this country and sort of where the player development is and how do we identify our best talents. And you're a guy who has to do that as part of your responsibilities for Arsenal, identifying players. And I guess just as a simple question, how do you go about that? What's the process in determining where you should be looking and who you should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is actually it's quite a unique market in that the size of the country makes it quite different from kind of all the other traditional, I guess, soccer countries in the world, bar Brazil, I suppose, because Brazil is quite big as well. But all your typical European countries like France, Spain, Germany, the UK, it's quite easy to kind of have a central area and be able to go out to the bigger clubs, the traditionally bigger clubs, and you can catch quite a few games kind of in a weekend. And with the U.S., it's quite different because you have to be kind of extremely, I guess, picky with the games that you go watch just because of the geography of our country. I've just come for Arsenal for about almost 8 years now. And when I first started, I kind of just went out and I had a contact base, I suppose, that I used a little bit, but it's certainly grown since I started, and I'm far pickier now. And as I said, when I first started, I would just go out and watch games and hope for the best. And now you have to develop a huge network of agents, coaches, and just contacts that you trust around the world, basically, and take their word kind of. And you go out, watch a player, and if he's good enough, you track them. So it's far less where you just kind of hit and hope, and now it's way more where you make phone calls, you pick your battles far more, and you go out and check the guys out.
So are you're dependent on that contact base, and you're dependent on, again, got people that you have learned to trust based on their eye. So it's you're sort of a net, and you're trying to catch. I mean, how do you filter out the good and the bad, and how many people unsolicited contact you?
Yeah, it is pretty hard. I mean, that is one of the kind of the difficult things. And you'll give, any scout will give a guy an opportunity if he presents a player. He'll give a guy an opportunity. But if he goes and watches the player and realizes the guy that recommended him kind of has no idea what he's talking about, then the next time that guy calls about the next Lionel Messi or the next Cristiano Ronaldo, he probably won't take him as seriously, if that makes sense. But it is hard, and being, these days it's like social media and just it's pretty easy to get in touch with people if you want to get in touch with people. There are a lot of requests to come watch players here and there, but that's where the importance of your network comes into play. Where if a guy mentions a player in a certain part of the country that I'm not familiar with, I'll make a phone call either to one of my contacts there or somebody that knows somebody in that area, and I'll make sure I get quite a bit of information on a player before I commit to going and watching. But yeah, it can be kind of overwhelming at times when you get online and you see that there's 25 next Ronaldos that are waiting to be seen in the U.S.
Well, isn't that a red flag right away? If somebody calls you up or somebody gets in touch and they say, "I've got the next Ronaldo, I've got the next Messi," that's a red flag. That would be a red flag to me, because that's a ridiculous thing to start talking about when a kid is. How young are you looking?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually gone to see players as young as 12, 13 years old. And I mean, you certainly don't make a move on a player that young immediately. It's one where you just kind of, if he's good enough, you start to build kind of a relationship with the coaches, the parents. And, but yeah, it is difficult. And a lot of the people in the States, unfortunately, have never been to a youth game in the UK, or they've never been to a reserve game. They don't actually know the standard that what they're basing their judgment off of is seeing, soccer on the weekends where the pros make it look extremely easy, and they kind of say, oh, well, my son or my player can fit into that system, when when really they have no idea what the standard at the reserve level is, or what the standard at the U18 level is, or even younger than that in the UK and or anywhere in the world at that. And it makes, it certainly makes it a little bit more challenging.
We've seen over the last couple of years a growth in European interest in American players, and I know sometimes there are rules involved in when kids can go, when they can't, and obviously that impacts who you're looking at and certainly what kind of tracking you're doing. But in a general sense, and I know you're only working with one club, and I'm sure you can only speak to their interest, but in a general sense, when you're out there, you see more of a European interest in American talent, and what does that say about the American talent, or is it just that it's been unmined to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely exciting, and I think for UK-based clubs, it's a little bit more challenging just because of the work permit issues.
Right.
And a lot of, kind of the casual soccer fan or the casual parent won't know about those work permit issues. And that's actually one of the first questions they'll ask when a player is recommended is, can he get a work permit, or can he get a European passport, or does he have one? Just because it's the biggest hurdle to come over, And sometimes that's actually my first question rather than what's the player like, just because if the player is amazing and doesn't have a permit, then it's far more difficult to get the kid over. But yeah, it's, there has been a greater interest, and it's super exciting for American soccer because you're starting to see more and more guys go over to the UK and or rather go over to Europe in general and some of the bigger and better leagues. I think before, even when I was 17 and I went to Arsenal, the idea of players going to Europe was still kind of foreign. There were guys that had gone over, John O'Brien had gone to Ajax. At the time, there were quite a few actually players playing in the Premier League, I suppose. Claudio Reyna and all the boys at Fulham as well were doing well in the Premier League, but it wasn't like a kind of a constant flow. Now you see more and more guys every transfer window. It seems that there's some player making the move over to Europe, and the fact that it's kind of like less of a big deal, if that makes sense, is actually kind of cooler because it's happening more and more often. And countries everywhere are starting to realize that there is talent here, and it can do well over there.
Now, one of the ongoing issues with youth development in America is sort of the clunky, obviously pay to play is a problem, but the clunky system that we have, this suburban system that has built up with everybody's got their little provinces that they want to protect. When you're doing your job or having been you're American, you grew up here before you left for Arsenal. What do you make of the system? And is there a fix? Is this something that's just going to have to resolve itself over time? When U.S. Soccer puts in the U.S. Development Academy, is that a positive? Is that a step in the right direction? These are complicated questions, I know, but everybody wants to see the system get better.
Yeah, and it's funny because right when I saw the issues with the structure of the youth levels is one of the things we talked about. I was like, wow, that's a 5-hour conversation.
Yes, it is. I realize
still, there's still no right answer. But yeah, as you mentioned, the Development Academy I think it's been exceptional because even when I was coming through, I played ODP growing up, right. And ODP was so dependent on you go, and if you have 2 good days, then for that year, then you're in the state pool or you're in the regional pool. And it was it was just kind of such a unnatural setting for a soccer player to have to perform, and whereas now, like, there's so many scouts, so many, coaches always watching games. Like, players are always getting assessed now, which is fantastic. So, you don't have to be involved in a regional camp anymore in order to get seen by a national team or in order to get called in by a national team, which I think that on its own is absolutely massive now. The fact that our country, as I mentioned this even in the scouting, the fact that our country is so big makes the development a little bit trickier, I think. And I was asked about kind of the style of the U.S. A couple of weeks back, and I said, well, it's so different because a player growing up in New York is going to play so much more different than a player that grows up, along the Mexican border or in Southern California. Like, the styles are completely different just because of how big our country is. But I think the Federation has done an exceptional job of trying to have, like, umbrella structure where from the top down they're trying to implement the strategies they want to implement across the board within the national teams and down to the club teams as well.
Is that disparate style issue, New York, Mexican border, LA, all of these, is that a strength or a weakness? Because, on one level, it's great that we have a range of styles happening and kids coming up through different under different coaches playing different ways. But at the same time, how do you get all of those parts together and make a cohesive unit?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't say it's a weakness. I mean, I think it's, for me, I think, as I said, like, it makes our country incredibly unique, because if you look at Europe, it's essentially getting players from England, from Germany, from Italy, from Spain, kind of throwing them all into one as a national team, and you're kind of given you can choose the best guys from all these different areas. It certainly, as I said, it's unique and it makes it different. I don't think it's by any means that it's a weakness of our country. We have players, as I said, that guys from the Midwest, for example, that are just hard tackling, tough nosed defenders, and then guys that can bring flair that grow up in more more Latin areas that have that Latin flair, in them. And I think it makes for an exciting kind of batch of players, and it's certainly not a weakness. It's an interesting thing to consider. And when you're out, I mean, when you're doing your job and this transition that we're seeing from, well, I guess it's not even a transition, it's sort of adding on to what we're already doing. There's all these youth clubs. Some of them are very powerful. Some of them have great reputations. Some of them are more about the business or just keeping going and that kind of thing. And then we throw in the MLS teams and their academies into the mix. How does the club academy fundamentally affect the way kids are being taught? And then what, obviously, purgatory where kids are coming through the academy, but they're still going to college, and they come out. And I guess I'm asking, how well, from your perspective, how well are MLS academies doing on that front? I think they're doing well enough. I mean, it's difficult because now that we have MLS academies, I think, like, all of a sudden everybody thinks that it's just going to be like Europe, where you're just producing homegrown talent and the talent's naturally going to feed into the first team. And I don't think that's the case. And you can't just because, DC United has an academy, or just because the Seattle Founders have an academy, just because of that they throw these teams together, doesn't exactly mean that all of a sudden they're just going to be able to start to develop players that are ready for the first team. I think it's great in the fact that, like, kids are now actually put into an environment where they can actually work their way up into the reserves and into the first team. They actually have kind of a goal at the end of it, because, as I mentioned, when I was 17, and I keep bringing that back up, but it's an easy reference for me. When I was 17, there were no MLS academies, and you literally just play, you play youth soccer until you're 18, and the next step is college, unless you were exceptional and got seen by an MLS club, which, very rarely happened. Then it was extremely difficult to get those 16, 17-year-old contracts. But now these kids are kind of thrown into a situation where they're getting called in to train with the first team. They're maybe making an Open Cup appearance here and there, and it'll take a little bit of time, but that's what needs to happen, where these players are getting the chance to train with the first team and getting to see what it's like on a match day, or getting to see what the daily grind is like. I think they're doing a good job. I mean, as I said, it doesn't, just because there's academies now, I don't think people can start to expect, like, all of a sudden there's going to be homegrown players coming, through the ranks and going straight into the first team immediately.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of appreciation of just how difficult that process is, even for clubs who have been doing it for a very long time, or clubs with big names and good reputations. I mean, it's a numbers game, even in Europe.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, even you look at some of the biggest clubs in the world, and having a player that's come to the club from 9 or 10 years old, and even 15, 16-year-olds, like, it doesn't happen very often. And when it does, it's a huge resounding success. And they love to they love to brag about homegrown players because it doesn't happen very much. So, to set the expectations, I think it'll take a little bit before you start to see players kind of coming through the homegrown ranks and actually, making a proper impact within their first teams. And when it does really start to happen, I think it'll be great for U.S. soccer.
Now, one of the things that U.S. soccer fans love to fixate on is when our American players go to big clubs. Clearly you at Arsenal and the guys that went to Manchester United, Kenny Cooper and Jonathan Spector, and whether they make it through or not, it's still sort of, we've got kids at Liverpool now and at Dortmund, all these places. Is the size of the club or the sort of the profile of the club important as a means to promoting American soccer's brand, or does it really matter if a kid is good enough to go play in Europe, even for a mid-table club in any of those leagues? Is that as important, I suppose?
I think it's great when you see players sign for United or Arsenal or Dortmund or any of these clubs you mentioned. That's fantastic, and it shows for youth soccer that these clubs are taking note of our youngsters, which is fantastic. But there also are you can't if a player goes to a club and never plays, then it doesn't matter what club he's in. If a player signs for Barcelona and never gets to see the pitch, then it's probably not the best of moves. I think one of the great things, I guess, with U.S. players right now is that more and more as I mentioned, more and more are starting to go over there, and you'll see players starting to go to more mid-level clubs, and they're playing consistently, and they're getting minutes, and then they're making moves to bigger clubs, and I think that's fantastic. When a player goes to an Arsenal or Man United, and these clubs, when these clubs come in for you, it's hard to say no. If a club like Arsenal or Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona, they come in, you're always going to think, well, what if you turn a club like that down to go to a more mid-level or lower-level club? I think it's great if when Michael Bradley, for example, was at Roma, I was extremely excited about that because you see an American player there. He made some 40-odd appearances there. You see a player who's playing in the national team, playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world consistently, and it excites you because they're not just doing that for marketing. You have to earn your spot in those clubs, and for a while, Bradley did, and that was great for us. Obviously, that's changed now, but I think as long as players are playing and they're playing at a level that challenges them, then it'll only benefit us.
And one of the things that I kind of harp on about, and you're in a unique position to talk about this with your experience, is that, despite the fact this is a very big country with a lot of people and a ton of kids playing soccer, more than probably any country in the world playing, we're not getting that quote-unquote world-class talent. And one of the reasons I think that, and obviously there are pockets of this country where this is not true, but generally speaking, soccer is not, in our blood, kind of, so to speak. I mean, we might start playing it when we're 5, 6, 7, but it's really not part of the day-to-day American culture. Is that a factor in how kids grow up and whether or not they're prepared to go to Europe and be a star?
From as you mentioned, from my experience, I think it's huge, and even for me, when I went to England as a 17, 18-year-old, I was extremely confident going over there. I thought I knew everything, as any 17 or 18-year-old does, But it was a massive wake-up call because I hadn't grown up in that culture. I mean, my mom's Italian and my dad's Iranian, so I did grow up in a soccer mad household. But
right.
At the end of the day, you go to a place where I went to a club like Arsenal, where you get there and you're like, oh, okay, I'm the new guy. I'm going to be buddies with everyone, and you realize that you just signed, and the kid that's been there since he was 9 years old doesn't get offered a new contract. Now suddenly all of his buddies who have been offered new contracts look at you like you're the bad guy, and that doesn't happen. That's part of the culture. That doesn't happen in the States. I'd never experienced that. Also, another big thing was that you when you're at a club, in the reserves or even in the youth team, you go to every single game on the weekend that are at home, and you see there's that goal of what you're working towards, and it's, as I said, it's not the fault of U.S. soccer. soccer is relatively, we're still growing. I mean, I think it's here. It's obviously here to stay, but it's still growing and has still a ways to go. But there was nothing for me. Like I had never had that experience. I had to drive 4 hours to go watch a DC United game when I was growing up. Whereas when I was in England, I would just take the tube 20 minutes and be at Highbury every single weekend to watch the first team play. And that, I was there during the Invincibles as well. So the experience there was kind of just ridiculous, for obvious reasons. But seeing the first team play every single weekend, seeing them at the training ground every day, hearing our reserve team coach, basically make references, not to some guy that's 4,000 miles away, but making a reference to a guy that's standing 5 yards from him, saying, "Did you just see his movement?" That makes a huge change, and in your mentality of how you want to go about your everyday business. And I think it plays a huge role. And these kids, like the kids grow up there reading the newspaper every single day. All that's in the paper, in the Sun, and the Daily Mail, all it is football on the back pages every single day. And it's part of it. You want to see that they're the superstars over there, and it makes you want to fight for that every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a disconnect, and there's long been a disconnect between playing soccer as a kid in the States and even for somebody like you who grew up in a household where it was important and sort of professional soccer. I mean, there was no clear path. And then when MLS came along, it's, well, what exactly is this? And it's such a big country, you can't cover the whole thing. And I guess it brings me to the question of, and there are battle lines drawn out there, Danny, and I'm sure you've run into some of these people, whether we should be doing it like everybody else here, because that's the way it's worked in England and Germany and Spain and Holland, or if there's going to have to be some sort of unique American approach to getting to that same kind of place that England has been for 100 years.
And if I had the answer, the right answer rather to that question, I'd probably be on a boat somewhere hanging out. But no, I think we have to. I think it'll have to be our own, innovative American way, to be completely honest. Because in England, like in London, on any given weekend, there's 20, 30 professional clubs just in one city. Playing, which means there's youth clubs looking up to those players, which means there's people paying money to go watch these games. And it's not like there's, as I said, like I had to drive 4 hours to go watch my first MLS game when I was a kid, and I was so far removed from that, the figuring out the best way to make everybody kind of feel a part of our professional culture will certainly be a challenge. But the cities that are doing a good job, like I've been to Portland. I've been to Portland several times. I've been to Seattle to watch games, and like that's there. I mean, those atmospheres are sometimes even better than Premier League atmospheres, and it's like that. That's amazing. And if you're in the youth setup in those cities, like, of course, like you want to make it into the first team, because that's absolutely incredible. I mean, you go there and you're like, wow, this is an absolute show that they're putting on every single week. But yeah, I mean, but then again, there's the kids that, you couldn't even drive to an MLS game because of where you're based. It'd take 10 hours to drive to your closest game. And and figuring out how we can get everybody kind of involved in the culture and everybody excited about the game. I think that's the biggest challenge.
And I think that people are impatient, and I can understand why. I mean, we all want to be where we want to be as soon as possible, but there's just some elements of this I think that are going to take time. I mean, I think about my son. He's 5 years old. I'm going to have him start playing, and it's, but I know he's going to go into a structured environment, and they're going to teach him the basics and everything else, but then he's going to come home, and if he runs out into the neighborhood, is he going to run into a bunch of kids who want to go kick the ball around and learn all that extra stuff and we talk about street soccer a lot in this country as some kind of magic bullet to getting our kids to be more creative and more comfortable with the ball, but even that's kind of a cultural development that has to take place over a generation or two, not just throw the ball out there and tell them to go play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, basically, what you want to see is those pickup games, not replacing, but going alongside all the pickup basketball that you see, all the pickup, touch football that you see, all these sort of things. Like as soon as we start seeing more and more guys where it's not forced either. Like
Right.
that's one of the things, as you mentioned. Like, I think in general as Americans, like we expect the best and we want to be the best at everything, and I think it's kind of hard for us to realize that we aren't the best at this, and pumping money into it will certainly improve us to an extent, but it also has to happen kind of naturally as well. People have to take to it, and it is, we are competing with these other sports, but at the same time, we're starting to see, the development academy. One great thing about it is that they're doing everything they can to make the academy free, which suddenly opens up so many more doors and allows far more players to get involved. And I think these things will only start helping. But it is hard, as I said, Americans want to see results immediately, and we're used to seeing results immediately. We're used to being the best at everything in the world, and the fact that we're not right now in soccer, it makes it very frustrating for a lot of people.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go is just a practical question. What's your average weekend like during tournament season or during, when you are actually out in the world or out in the States looking for kids? What's your average weekend like?
It depends. I mean, if I'm going to just watch a single game, like an MLS game or a game where I've been told a kid's doing really well, I'll just basically fly out and watch the game and then fly home and write a report if it's worth writing a report on. If it's a tournament, I mean, tournaments can get, some of them go on for a week, and they can get quite exhausting going out and watching a bunch of games.
Yes.
And I think in the beginning, when I first started scouting, I made it a point to go watch like the 9 game, the 11 game, the 1 o'clock game, and watch like 7 games in a row. And by the end of the day, like, you have no idea what you're watching.
No.
Your vision's blurred.
Yeah.
You have no idea what's going on. But I've certainly become far more selective now, and you kind of pick and choose your battles. And it's fun. You go and seeing when you actually see a player that excites you, that really, really excites you, and you think like this kid might have a chance, which, as you probably know, doesn't happen very often at all. It is very, very exciting and rewarding.
I've covered one youth tournament as a paid writer. It was in Richmond. It was in Richmond. I think you were probably there. I may have seen you walking around. I was told, hey, cover 2 games at once. So I'm looking left and right. I'm having to watch both, make notes, try to write a report. It was the most insane thing I've ever been a part of in my entire life. I can't imagine going out and doing that and trying to pick out individual players. Danny Carbassione, Arsenal Scout in America, founder of Swole, Soccer Without Limits. Swole.co is the website. Go check that out. Thank you, Danny. I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, Jason, thanks a lot for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Let's take a break. Ooh, let's get rid of that one. When we come back, we're going to talk to Matt Barber down in Dallas. We'll get a little preview of FC Dallas' season and the MLS campaign of 2014. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
You may have heard, and I may have mentioned it, MLS season starts tomorrow. Saturday. And to talk about FC Dallas, preview their season a bit, new coach, perhaps a new attitude, Matt Barber from MLSsoccer.com, Matt_Barber on Twitter. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm very good, Jason. How about yourself today?
I am good. Now, let's talk about FC Dallas. Is FC Dallas good? Are they ready? What's the feeling around that team right now after a very difficult 2013?
Excitement.
Okay.
In one word, definitely excitement. You know, this team has had a heck of a lot of turnover in just 1 year. Obviously, you mentioned the new coach, which I'll even hold my own feet to the fire and say that I made a fantastically bad prediction on your show last time I was on.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember, but you specifically asked me about Oscar, and I was like, oh, no way he wants to take that job. So,
right.
No. I mean, Oscar's brought a tremendous attitude to the team. He has a certain love for the club from his time here as a player, from his time running the youth system. I mean, he clearly has a relationship with the Hunts and with Dan Hunt in particular that made them want to go out and get him. I mean, you have to give the Hunts credit in that they decided who they wanted and they did what it took to bring him here.
Now he comes with obviously this has been it's been an interesting run with Shellis Hyndman in the job, and he made the playoffs a couple times, got them to an MLS Cup final. But what's the feeling? I always felt like he wasn't going to get fired; he was going to have to step down, and sure enough, in the end, that's what happened. What was the general feeling of Hyndman's legacy at this point?
Well, I mean, his legacy in the Dallas area is secure. From his time with SMU, from all the clinics he's run in the Dallas area. I mean, he's certainly still well liked and respected around the club. So I mean, I think long term, I mean, there's just no doubt his time will always be looked back on fondly. But it's if you're being honest, I mean, there's also probably time for a change because things had grown a bit stale under him. So with not only Oscar, the roster turnover has just been incredible. I mean, there's 18 players on this roster that are either in their first or second year with the club. They only have 6 guys that have three or more years experience with the club. I mean, so besides just the coaching change, I mean, they're bringing in a completely new set of players that to have a new style, a attitude, and a very, very youthful direction.
And what is that? I mean, look, Oscar Pereira comes off of a campaign last year with Colorado that was a bit of a surprise, got them into the playoffs, relied heavily on young players, perhaps by virtue of all of those injuries, he may not have chosen in that path if he was able to have a choice. In this team, is he going to go in a youthful direction? Are there players that we can pick out and say he's going to benefit from Oscar being here?
Fabian Castillo, I think for sure. I mean, this is Fabian's year to kind of take that next step. I mean, he really made strides last year in his possession and not trying to be as I call it cute on the ball and trying to do sweet FIFA moves out there. I mean, he really didn't turn the ball over quite as dramatically as he had in the past. He did a lot better job of looking for ground crosses within the box and wide crosses from the wings. But he really needs to take that next step and become a consistent goal scorer, and not just be known as a speed guy up and down the wings. But even besides, I mean, the entire roster is young. I mean, Jason, they have three young DPs, and there's only 6 young DPs in all of MLS, and Dallas has 3 of them on their roster. So yeah, I mean, to say that there's a youth movement it's clear and obvious. That's absolutely what it is.
Is that a function of some penny pinching on the part of the Hunts, or is that a specific kind of laid out plan for this club that really does have some thought behind it?
I think it's both. I mean, they've been very honest and said that their strategy is to not go out and sign a big money, big dollar international player, but at the same time, they absolutely are looking for good young talent that may have fallen through the cracks for teams elsewhere that can come in and help the club. I mean, they've set this club up to have to grow together for the next few years with the number of rookies and young players and the young DPs like I just mentioned.
This is a team that's got, a good core. You talk about how young they are, but they've got a good core. Matt Hedges has made a name for himself as a defender. We know about George John, who's 26 now. Is there, and while I was sort of assessing what this team can do in 2014, it occurs to me that if a couple of these guys go down, they might be in some serious trouble. Is there any sense that the depth is good enough to get them through the whole campaign?
It's funny you mentioned that because, they're dealing with that kind of already in the center back position. George is hurt and is, in all likelihood, not going to play Saturday. I'm not really revealing anything there. And they've also had a couple of other guys in, Walker Zimmerman and Stephen Keel that in the center back position that are also dealing with knocks. So that's why Moises Hernandez, who was a guy that a lot of general MLS fans may not have heard of, but, he's certainly been somebody that FC Dallas fans have had their eyes on for the last couple of years while he's been on loan in Costa Rica and Guatemala, and he played with Saprissa, which CONCACAF Champions League fans should be familiar with that team. Mm-hmm. And he did well there. He's a natural left back, but he's played center back for FC Dallas throughout the preseason, and I expect him to be playing center back on Saturday.
We know about Blas Perez, and he's probably going to have to carry most of the goal-scoring load up top. This team still has Eric Hostley. I forget about him so easily at this point, Matt. I don't know what that says. and is there there's another forward or two who's going to be able to help Blas Perez carry some of that load? And obviously, look, Perez isn't going to miss as much time as he did last year with international duty. That'll be a major help, but is there somebody else who can step in behind him and get some of those goals?
Well, they just signed as the third young DP, David Teixeira from FC Groningen in the Netherlands. I'm not even going to try and say it because I'll screw it up, but the Dutch league. And I think he's going to be brought along slowly. I don't know that he's going to be expected to carry a heavy load right away, but he'll absolutely see the field. He's a little bit kind of a tweener between the size and type of player that Blas is and Hostley is or is when he's healthy, and that Kenny Cooper was. He's not quite as much of a target striker, a little bit shorter, but he is definitely a stout guy. I saw him at the cocktails and cleats last night for the jersey unveiling, and he's a little bit shorter than me at 6'2", but definitely a thick guy. I think, they brought in Escobar, who should certainly help out on the wings. And I think there's going to be expectation for Mauro Diaz, to be able to pitch in a few from the attacking midfield position. So it's, Blas and I talked about it yesterday. He says he doesn't feel pressure to take all the scoring on his shoulders because of the way Oscar's system is set up, the way the attack is supposed to be so fluid with guys moving in and out of positions. He expects the goals to kind of be spread around a bit.
Well, let's talk about that system. With the roster turnover, always easier to put in a system with a bunch of guys who are open and receptive rather than some who have been playing in the same system for years. So that'll help. But what is Oscar going to change fundamentally about the way FC Dallas plays?
Well, Schellis's preferred system was a 4-4-2 with a diamond midfield. And based on personnel and injuries, a lot of times he would play in a 4-2-3-1 with, Blas alone up top. Oscar definitely likes the 4-3-3. And, even before Oscar was brought on, technical director Fernando Clavijo was already talking about a 4-3-3. That's just a clear direction that the club wanted to go in what they consider to be a bit of a more attacking formation, and tactically on the field. So, that's certainly what you're going to see. I think the midfield is going to kind of flip, from either having two more holding midfielders, with Diaz more of the attacker up top, or at times, perhaps just one holding midfielder at the back and two more push forwards. So that triangle is going to switch back and forth. But I think the 4-3-3 look is going to be what you see more often than not out of FC Dallas.
Now, look, this is FC Dallas is in the Western Conference. This is still, despite all the improvements and the money being spent out east, this is still the tougher of the two conferences. Everybody's picking the Timbers to repeat as in first place. You've got the Sounders who should rebound from a difficult season. LA is always going to be tough. Who knows what Colorado's going to have if they ever get a coach. What is FC Dallas' RSL? I don't want to leave them out. What is FC Dallas' ceiling in this campaign, and really, what are they looking for? I mean, if Oscar gets them to sixth, and they just miss out on the playoffs, can they deem that a success?
They won't call that a success for sure. I mean, and I don't think any team rightfully would. I mean, I think if they by the end of the season are seeing the guys play the way they want to play, if it's a fun, interesting attacking style, if they're not having long stretch of the season, where they're not putting in the back of the net like they did last year, that's certainly going to be an improvement in style. But I mean, it's still a playoffs or bust kind of a scenario. I mean, they expect for the team to be able to come together, to be able to grab one of the playoff spots. There's a lot of youth on the team, but there's also a lot of veteran guys, that haven't been in the playoffs the last couple of years, and they're hungry to get there. So I don't think you're going to hear anybody around there call it any kind of success if they do anything but make the playoffs.
Last year they started out so well, man, and it was a surprise. I mean, to see FC Dallas leading the league like they were for I don't know how long it lasted, but it was a third of the season, or at least it felt like that, and then it dropped completely off the table. If anything, I suppose Oscar's first job is to just make them more of a level team across the year, rather than they may not win everything. They're not going to go out there and win every game. But if he can avoid those long losing streaks or those long winless streaks, then that's already an improvement.
Absolutely. And I think there were a couple of things that went into that good early season form last year. And, Shellis Hyman himself even said later in the year last year that a lot of that winning streak was kind of smoke and mirrors. I mean, they were getting a lot of set piece goals in, which, as we all know, can be kind of streaky for any team. And they were closing out games that later in the year they were giving up late goals to either drop 2 points and get a draw, or end up losing a match because of their difficulties in securing the defensive midfield position last year. Because they tried everybody back there, but now with the off season moves that they made for Hendry Thomas and for Adam Moffat, with a healthy Peter Lucene, certainly with Andrew Jacobson, who was just named team captain last night. I mean, all of a sudden they turned what looked like a weakness, a glaring weakness last season, into what should be a strength this year.
If you had to pick out, one player to watch at this point, maybe not a known name. I mean, we could ID Hendry Thomas, Blas Perez, those guys. But if you're going to pick out somebody who could have an impact, maybe won't start to begin the year, but could have an impact on this team that has ability and hasn't quite shown his level yet, who would that be?
From what I've seen in practice, and this might be a bit of a long shot, but Tesho Akindele, I mean, they're picking it in the super draft. I mean, he, when I watch him do finishing drills, I mean, he is just uncanny for being able to get shots on target from weird angles, from strange angles. He's a lanky guy. He has a lot of speed. He brings a lot of energy. If he's able to find some time on the pitch, I mean, I think he could, be one of those guys that just happens to be around the ball and happens to put him in the back of the net, because right place, right time, and he can certainly be one that makes a bit of a name for himself. Just talking about guys that aren't necessarily on the first team radar. I mean, and there's also a little bit of a known name in Kellen Acosta, just because I think he's definitely going to grow in his game quite a bit, and after the World Cup year, he's going to probably start to put himself into the national team picture, moving forward in years forward.
Now, this is I have to ask these questions because perceptions linger, and FC Dallas has struggled in the past, made big strides off the field and getting people into that building, but and obviously this isn't your concern heading into a new season, your first concern anyway, but I have to ask, what's the buzz like in the soccer community in Dallas? How does FC Dallas expect to do at the gate in 2014?
I think they expect to do well. I mean, the last time that Dan Hunt and I talked about it, I mean, they've been doing very well corporate sponsor wise. The suites are all sold out. They expected to do as well with season tickets this year as they've done in the past. I mean, they set a record last year, even in a season that ended up being disappointed. They set a record for total attendance. the perception of the past is exactly that. It's a perception of the past, and they're bringing in far more fans than I think a lot of MLS fans realize. The atmosphere in the stadium is far different than it used to be. When I first started coming to games when they first moved to Frisco. So I think MLS fans around the league probably need to move on from the FC Dallas doesn't feel their stadium perception, because they were middle of the pack in attendance last year, and I expect they'll be probably pretty much the same this year.
Yeah, find a new whipping boy, MLS fans. It's not FC Dallas anymore.
Exactly.
Now, is there any? I haven't heard anything. I have no reason to ask this question other than it would be nice. Is there any sense that they're ever going to put a roof on that place?
We talked about that also with Dan Hunt. I mean, obviously not any kind of a complete roof, but I mean they have looked into, with architectural firms, putting a partial roof to be able to block like 85 to 90% of the sunlight, or of the. Let me say this another way: to be able to cover 85 to 90% of the stand,
right,
at kickoff, so that they're not sitting in the sun. I mean, they purposely schedule a lot of their games very early in the year and later in the year to not have as much in the middle of the summer, later start times. I mean, they are very conscious of, look, it's not a lot of fun to sit outside in 100 degrees in the middle of the summer. Everybody gets that, and they are doing everything they can to kind of try and mitigate that. But yeah, they absolutely have looked into it. If it's going to happen, I know it's not, it's not going to happen this year, but it is something that they have looked into. Like a feasibility study.
I bet I'm putting you on the spot. Where does FC Dallas finish this season?
If everything comes together just right, if they don't have any major injury concerns, for the whole year, and if a few of the young players, come through like they expect, I think they absolutely could grab the 5th spot in the West. I mean, if I'm being realistic, I think they'll probably finish just outside of the playoffs, but be a very exciting, fun team to watch that has a lot of promise for the future.
Yeah, look, if Oscar Pereira can do in Dallas what he did in Colorado last year, there'll at least be a lot more fun to watch soccer from FC Dallas. Matt Barber covers the team at MLSsoccer.com. Follow him on Twitter, Matt_Barber with an O and a U there at the end. Thanks for your time, Matt. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
Let's take a break. There's breaking news. The MLS referees are being locked out. We'll maybe talk about that. But next up, Christian Iari from Bundesliga Fanatic will join us. We'll talk some German soccer with him. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, I'm joined now by Christian Iari from Bundesliga Fanatic, our German football expert with fantastic hair. We'll talk to Christian in a second. We definitely have to talk about this news that's breaking. MLS referees have been locked out. by the Professional Referees Organization, which I know is confusing. PRO is the group that was formed to oversee the referees and continue their education and improve the program, but they are not the union. The union, which is brand new, is the Professional Soccer Referees Association, the PSRA, because Americans love acronyms, and they are being locked out by Pro. That's what we've got going on. Now, remember, the MLS season starts tomorrow. Looks like we're staring down the possibility of replacement refs unless something happens between now and then, which who knows? I'm not a labor negotiation expert, but that seems very unlikely. Here's a couple of quotes. We have made substantial proposal to the Professional Soccer Referees Association and believe it is very fair and reasonable, said Pro General Manager Peter Walton. Our proposal represents a significant increase above current compensation for referees and places them above the average for officials around the world. We are disappointed it has been rejected. And then obviously they have made the decision to pass on the no strike, no lockout agreement. So again, what this means exactly, I don't know, except that you won't have Mark Geiger to kick around tomorrow. So we'll discuss this as news trickles out. But Christian's here. We had Christian book, and we've got to talk to Christian. Christian, how are you?
Good. I don't want to get in the way of this.
Well, okay. Look, if you want to give me, how about this? This is what we'll do. Okay, Christian Yari, American Bay, certainly has an eye on MLS, but a German football expert. In comparison to German referees, how bad are MLS referees?
Oh my god, that's all right. I mean, there's no easy way to answer that. There's no way to answer that without pissing someone off.
No, look, I mean, the referees here have a terrible reputation. That is a fact.
Yeah.
I will defend them to the point that their job is very difficult, but clearly the standard needs to be raised a lot here. So
do referees have good reputations anywhere?
No, that's kind of my point every time it gets out of control. There are individual cases. There are certainly moments where criticism of a referee is fair and necessary. And again, we need to see refereeing improve in this country, but all around the world. And I'm sure when we get to the World Cup in Brazil, there's going to be something that happens with a referee that will piss everybody off, Christian. I'm just trying to get a sense from a guy who covers the Bundesliga week in and week out. If you were going to compare, like if Bundesliga referees are good, better than average, and then where do MLS referees fall on that same scale? Excuse me.
Okay, I'll be honest. There's really no comparison. I think, and all right, I might be biased here, but I think that the Bundesliga refs are probably the best around.
Okay,
but only because they are meticulously trained. The standards are really, really high. If they do screw up, they get replaced really, really quickly. So people are constantly on them. And that's just kind of maintained the really, really high standard. I mean, that's not to say that they get things wrong. I mean, we saw this season that
we had a ghost goal in the Bundesliga.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these things are going to happen no matter how good your referees are. But the standard is certainly higher, but it's not higher just in the MLS. I think it's higher than the other top leagues as well.
Fair enough. And look, I mean, I think part of Major League Soccer's problem and American soccer's problem is just the pool is not very deep. I mean, first of all, the type of people who choose to become referees, those people are rare to begin with. And then you have to go through the process and the training and be taught how to referee the game properly. And then when you go and you do it at a professional level, you are subject to some of the most heinous abuse possible, short of violence. And sometimes referees are actually subject to violence. And that's got to be a scary thing. This is why, again, MLS referees bad. Let's just take that as a given. But improving the program can't be easy considering all of the things that go into that job.
To me, it's the toughest job. One of the toughest jobs in soccer. I mean, you have to find the balance between kind of being the voice of authority on the field and not getting involved in, you have all these altercations on the field and players yelling at each other, then players yelling at you as the referee. You kind of have to remove yourself from the game, but also keep yourself involved in the game enough where you kind of keep a grip on it and you maintain the respect of the players.
Yeah.
It's a very, very tricky balance for referees to have. And, I almost always sympathize with referees when everyone's critical of them, just because I feel like I think the casual observer or fans don't really understand what it's it's like to be in an environment like that.
Mm-hmm. The environment, the speed of the game. Look, we always talk about, it needs to be positioned correctly, and that's the basic thing. If a referee is not positioned correctly, that's fair criticism. If he is positioned correctly and it's still very difficult to make that decision, dive or penalty, again, I mean, we get to go back and watch it 1,200 times in slow motion. They don't get to do that. They have to make the call in that moment. This from Stephen Goff of the Washington Post. MLS replacement refs were in training camp last week in case of impasse. Group includes foreign officials, which could mean anything. So MLS fans better brace for, for Armageddon, I suppose. It could be interesting. I would love to see the season come down to 1 or 2 points, and this weekend be the problem, be the points that got dropped by some team that had a chance at the Supporters' Shield or a playoff spot. That would be fun, wouldn't it? All right, Christian, let's talk about Germany. Let's talk about German soccer. Let's focus on the national team first. We just got done with an international day, a FIFA date. Germany beat Chile 1-0. What are the takeaways there for Germany and Yogi Löw?
Yeah, it was really, really weird because normally Germany do really, really poorly in friendlies. I mean, I'll say this right off the bat. They played really, really poorly. It was probably the most disappointing performance I've seen under Löw in years. But they won, which is very unusual because Germany usually don't win friendlies, or when they do perform badly, they don't get the results. But they got the result here, partially because Chile's finishing was bad also. But they were just kind of lucky enough to scrape a win, and that's kind of prevented media kind of just coming down on Löw. But if the game proved very, very clearly that there's still a lot of work to be done, and Löw and all the players said so afterwards. I think they kind of all of them took the game a little too easy, and I don't think, I guess, we're expecting Chile to come out like they did.
Chile's a decent side, a good side. Certainly would give them a challenge. And I guess from the casual observer's perspective, if we're not watching Germany's process headed towards the World Cup, it's easy for everyone to say, and clearly Americans have an interest now with Germany in the group. It's easy for everyone to sort of say, well, look at all the talent they got. This is not a problem. They're going to walk out there and beat anybody. Beat most teams, and then when they get to the later rounds, they'll have a shot to go win the whole thing. Is it what's not easy about this?
Yeah, you would think so. On paper, it's what could go wrong, right? You're ready made for success, but I think sometimes it's even harder, which, again, to me makes what Spain accomplished so damn impressive, because balancing a large talent pool is often much more difficult than having a smaller squad with a kind of a consistent starting 11 that you can just try from game to game. But here Löw has to, against Chile, he gave a player, it was, I think, Matthias Ginter from Freiburg. He made his debut. It was, I think, if I remember correctly, the 54th player who he gave an international debut to since he took over as manager. And that's on top of the guys that were already integrated by the time he took over. And that just goes to show you how large a talent pool is. So for Löw, it's constantly trying to find in the short FIFA calendar a way to keep the group integrated, find the right balance of talent, also compensate for the guys that are injured. And there's been a lot of injuries for Germany in the last year or so. So it hasn't been easy. And he warned the whole squad leading up to the Chile game that, more than ever before, everyone has to be on their game. No one's spot is really guaranteed in the team. Of course, some spots are, that's without a question, but he was trying to clearly put pressure on a group of players who many feel sometimes can get a little complacent. And that's also kind of the worry with the team going into Brazil.
Yeah, we said, I think it's easy for fans to sort of think of these processes as incremental, always moving forward, always moving up. I think certainly U.S. fans are guilty of assuming that it should be progress on top of progress on top of progress. It's not always that way. And Löw has been in this job for a long time now. Is any of this related to him? Just, the team could be stagnating, and he may need to find a way to sort of inject a little enthusiasm and some drive. But is it also on him, having been in that job for 2 cycles now?
Yeah, I mean, there's two camps. One of them is definitely on the side that it's just a matter of time with this Germany team before they win something. So success is almost expected. But it's like you said, sometimes things can go down before a potential is even achieved.
Mm-hmm.
And, Germany are not excluded from that. And it's very much a reality that this can happen to Germany. It could almost be like, that golden Portuguese generation that never really lived up to all the talent they had. And there's also the other camp who thinks that it's Löw holding the team back. And if it were someone else, like a more experienced guy, maybe like Jupp Heynckes or even Jürgen Klopp, he could really kind of take him over the bump and finally get them to win something. But these things are really, really difficult to dissect and really analyze without knowing what's happening inside the camps or really being in the players' heads.
It is interesting. How is Jogi Löw using Philipp Lahm, and how is that different than what Lahm is doing at Bayern Munich right now?
Well, I think he's kind of reluctantly accepted that Lahm has to play in midfield. I think he was maybe trying to reject that what Guardiola is doing at Bayern a little bit, but I mean, Bayern being so successful and Philipp Lahm playing there every single game, it's kind of made him accept that he has to do something similar on the national team stage. That didn't quite work out that well against Chile, but I think that's due to other reasons. But I think tactically, the evolution of the German national team definitely points to a very kind of Guardiola-esque system where you have kind of one holder, namely Philipp Lahm, and then these kind of two transitional central midfielders ahead of him. And it's something that might be too close to the World Cup to change, but it's something that Löw has to consider now. It's almost like there's no turning back now, and he has to do this to keep the player happy, because Lahm clearly wants to play in midfield. He loves it there. I mean, he's playing it every single weekend for Bayern, and I think he's better there, and I think the national team needs him. But that also means he has to make a bunch of changes around that. He can no longer, I think, go with the double pivot of Schweinsteiger and Khedira, which has been kind of the foundation of the team for so many years.
It leads me to a question of how much of Germany and what Löw is doing is dictated by Bayern, by the shadow cast by that club.
Yeah, a lot, and this is one of the things people in the anti-Löw camp use. It's that he often takes too long to arrive to conclusions, and when he does, it's because someone else is doing it. Like there's an influential player that's doing something or playing in a position, or a team playing a certain way that he's kind of just reluctantly accepting and adapting to, rather than kind of finding his own ideas. But I think in the Bayern case, it's almost foolish not to try and copy it. Obviously, it's a different. Bayern have a different coach, they have a different squad, but I think what Bayern are doing, or the system Guardiola is playing, is exactly or plays into the kind of squad and players Germany have. So I think it would be a wasted opportunity not to try and do that.
Well, but yeah, how much of a barrier is Löw's ego? I mean, I don't know much about whether he's got one, but that's got to be interesting from a coaching perspective. This is my team. I'm going to try to go win a World Cup, and I'm going to have to take my cues from I'm going to, for lack of a better word, the carpetbagger from Spain. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really known to be to have much of an ego, but he's kind of stubborn in his convictions until results point otherwise. And I mean, that was the case all the way back at the 2008 Euros, where he midway or halfway through the tournament just decided to switch from a 4-4-2 to a 4-2-3-1, when it was obvious in qualifying that that's what Germany had to do. So that serves as an example of where maybe his stubbornness more than his ego can sometimes get in the way.
So what are the expectations? I mean, look, we're 3 months away from 3.5 months away from the World Cup, or whatever it is at this point. What are expectations in Germany? I mean, I think it's easy for a lot of people to just sort of throw them into the general pile that includes Brazil and Spain, but are they really there? And is the expectation in Germany that they can go and actually win this?
Sure. I mean, Germany were fantastic in World Cup qualifying. They had a perfect record almost. It was one of their best qualifying campaigns ever. But at the same time, many people think they were pretty disappointing at the Euros in 2012. And with the injuries, with Löw's kind of tinkering and some uncertainty in the squad, I think there's slowly starting to creep in maybe the reality that, yeah, even 4 years after South Africa, this team is still not quite there yet. But I mean, it's also the fact that no European team has ever won the World Cup in South America. So that's something that has to be considered. But I mean, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people share this, is that we're still 2 or 3 years away from this team really coming together. And I think that has to do partially with Löw and also partially to do with the fact that a lot of the guys who should be playing aren't in the team. Löw still prefers Per Mertesacker, for example, over a player like Mats Hummels. Löw still plays Miroslav Klose, and he will still take Mario Gomez to the World Cup when, kind of the I guess the zeitgeist, the tactical zeitgeist points in a complete opposite direction. So that's that.
Yeah. Is there any sense that Germany is just going to melt when they get to Brazil? I mean, you mentioned the European teams never winning in South America. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here is the weather.
The weather is a big deal, and that's one of the things the coaching staff talked about in the preparations almost every single time. The weather. We're conditioning all our players to deal with these extreme temperatures. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know how well you can prepare someone for the weather when you're not, in fact, in the country. But, I mean, I'm sure they have their methodology by now. But I think with Germany, it'll be more other factors like, the mentality of the players, the coaching, how much confidence Löw can instill in this group of players, what the squad makeup will be, who he's going to take, who he's going to play. Is he going to start Klose, an aging player who, even in the Chile match, it was very, very clear to see that he's just a step or two behind everyone. He's still a very player, but he should not be starting.
You get the sense that I'm looking at the schedule right now. Germany and Salvador against Portugal, Fortaleza against Ghana, and Recife against the U.S. You get the sense that this group is so much about those first two games. I mean, the two games that open up the group, that those games will determine how everything else falls out. And I guess that's good from a preparation standpoint. Both Germany, Portugal, Ghana, they could all sort of aim directly at those games and say, if we get 3 points here, then we're coasting.
It's good for Germany and the U.S., isn't it?
Yes.
It kind of sets them up perfectly to kind of avoid having that final game be the decider, although it still could.
Well, I mean, for the United States, if they get to Germany and they need points, that's really bad. I mean, if they need 3 points, that's really, really bad. I mean, the idea that they could maybe go into the German game with the thought of getting a point is different than say, oh, look, we've lost one, we drew with Ghana. They have to beat Ghana. That's not really about Germany, but they have to beat Ghana in order to set themselves up. So.
And even if Germany do beat Portugal, it'll put Portugal in a tough spot in the second game too. So
right. Yeah, absolutely. That makes that game much more difficult for the United States if Portugal comes in needing 3 points. And their attitude towards it. All right, let's just briefly go back to Germany, talk Bundesliga. I'm looking at I went to BundesligaFanatic.com this morning. I'm looking at a piece by Niklas, and it's about how Bayern's going to break every record possible. How many records is Bayern going to break this season?
Every single one, it looks like, right? I mean, they have a chance of breaking a record this weekend. Which, I mean, every time you look at a match preview in Germany this year, the match previews always lead with, what records will Bayern break this weekend? Because, I mean, it just seems like that's the case this season. I mean, if they beat Wolfsburg, which everyone thinks they will, they'll have gone 16 consecutive games without a loss in the league, which no one has done. They'll probably go unbeaten this season, which is a record. That's not a surprise. I can't see any team in the league really stopping them unless Bayern just kind of wrap up the league and then just focus on the Champions League, which is also a possibility. But I just think Guardiola is keeping the standard so high that he just won't allow for that. And I still think he'll play his probably strongest team in the last month or so as well. They'll definitely break the most points gathered in a season record. They'll win the record for most home wins. They'll probably break their own defensive record for fewest goals conceded last year. Most clean sheets, for sure. Their defense has just gotten stronger and stronger after starting a little bit shaky. They'll also break the record for the biggest gap between first and second, which is already a record. Most goals scored, that's possible as well for them. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. Go to Bundesliga if I check out this list. I mean, it's insane how many records are going to fall in front of this machine that Pep Guardiola has rolling right now. Let's look ahead. You mentioned that though that he'll probably in for whatever reason. I mean, why not? If you have the players available, play his best team down the stretch of the season, last month of the season, which maybe we could talk about how that might affect the World Cup team. I don't know if that's a big deal. But you would prefer to have those guys getting as much rest as possible heading into the summer. But then there's the Champions League, as you mentioned. He can go, everybody assumes they're going to beat Wolfsburg. I think he can go into Wolfsburg or go up against Wolfsburg and play his best team and then still play his best team or something approximating his best team against Arsenal to wrap up that tie.
Yeah, and that's something typical with Guardiola. I mean, if he makes changes, it'll be 2 changes maybe at most. But for the most part, he's kind of kept his teams consistent. I just think it's a way of him managing expectations and just telling the players, look, we have a congested fixture. We have a congested schedule, so we'll need you to perform very well every single game. And if you don't, we have 2 or 3 guys who are going to be happy to take your place. And the players have all, to their credit, responded brilliantly to that. I don't know how much Guardiola really cares about the World Cup or having these players be fit. And, certainly he's not going to listen to... he's not going to be open to listening to players wanting to rest.
Right.
For Guardiola, it's all about the club and Bayern seeing out the season successfully.
Yeah, that again, sort of the dynamic there, the relationship between the national team and Bayern. I just wonder how that plays out, and I guess it really won't be an issue until we see what happens with Germany at the World Cup. Looking at the rest of this table right now, you mentioned they're probably going to set a record for the biggest gap between first and second. Dortmund has separated themselves from everybody else to get into second place at this point. Leverkusen, Schalke, these are teams that are going out of the Champions League by all guesses. Who's going to end up, and then Wolfsburg right behind Schalke in fifth place, who's going to end up getting those third and fourth spots in the end? Or is anything going to change between now and the end of the season?
A lot of it depends how Schalke and Leverkusen react after they get eliminated. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. They'll be knocked out. Leverkusen have kind of been free-falling. I think they've lost 6 of their last 8. Which is one of their worst runs ever. Just give you context, at one point they were 4 points behind Bayern, and now it's 22. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, their form has been pretty bad. So a lot of where they finish depends on how they react afterwards. There's a lot of talk about them and what's going on. Some people are saying Sami Hyypiä should be sacked, but don't think they'll do that just yet. So for Leverkusen, it'll be important to just kind of get their stuff together and start getting results. And if they and Schalke do that, the table should look, or the top 4 should look like what they are now, unless they just kind of completely collapse, and then it's just Wolfsburg who are just kind of there and eager and waiting and pouncing, because they've been one of the best or the most informed teams lately. And if anyone's going to get into that top 4, it's them. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at the wrong column, and Dortmund hasn't separated themselves. So forget anything I said on that level. Yeah. It's only 2 points on Leverkusen at the moment. So there's it's tight from 2 down to, I don't know, take it all the way down to 5th or 6th. I mean, I don't think Mainz is coming up that far, but or Gladbach for that matter. But then it's pretty tight from, I don't know, I guess I guess in terms of the relegation battle, anybody from
11th down, anyone can get relegated.
Is there? I mean, Hamburg, Freiburg, and Braunschweig. Are those the 3? Right now, those are the 3 in the relegation spot. But Stuttgart only ahead on goal differential, I would imagine, and then Nuremberg's 4 points ahead of that. Who's more likely to drop into the relegation zone from those clubs? Or Werder Bremen?
It's probably going to be Stuttgart. I think, what is it now, 8 consecutive losses, which is one of the worst runs in club history. And and their coach Thomas Schneider was very lucky to avoid getting sacked. There were talks within the clubs this week whether they should stick with him and do one of those late in the season coaching changes that gives him one of those bumps. But surprisingly, they decided to stick with him, which was a very, very risky thing to do. And if they do get relegated, the supporters are going to look back at this decision this week and just really go to town on management. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. I think Freiburg and Braunschweig are probably going to be the two going down. As much as it pains me to say about Freiburg because I really like them and their coach, but they haven't been very good this season, and they had so much turnover in the summer. It was kind of impossible for them to continue doing what they did last year. So they're probably going to go down, and then it'll most likely be between Hamburg and Stuttgart for the relegation playoff spot.
There you go, Christian Nari from Bundesliga Fanatic joining us. It's been a little while. Good to talk to you as always, Christian. I very much appreciate it, man.
Pleasure. Enjoy the MLS this weekend.
I absolutely will. Thanks a lot, Christian. There he goes, Christian Nari from Bundesliga Fanatic. We're wrapping up this edition of Soccer Morning, another week of Soccer Morning. Again, MLS season starts tomorrow. We have obviously got plenty of European action to look forward to as well. Your soccer weekends are now completely and utterly jam-packed. You have no time for your families anymore. You have no time to do anything else but watch soccer. This is the way it has to be. It's the way it has to be. I'm kidding, of course. You'll find your spots in there. You're not going to watch every single game. I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel for the Crew fans out there. I touched on this at the very top of the show. Local TV deal, and I think there are some teams that still don't have their schedules out. Maybe we can check in with Jonathan Tannenwald at the beginning of next week to see where the TV deals are for these teams locally, because that's one of the issues with MLS and getting there is getting these teams on local television in places where people can see them. When you're on Time Warner Sports, only on Time Warner Cable, and everybody else is blacked out, then that's not good for your brand in your town. I don't know. I don't know how much money the Time Warner is throwing at the Crew. Well, that doesn't seem like a good way to handle their business. All right, let's squeeze in a phone call. Why not? 313. You have about 30 seconds. What's up?
Jason, it's Isaac from Pittsburgh. I just want to say about the MLS refs. When you're young, you're stuck in a bad relationship. You think you can't do any better, but let me tell MLS, there's always someone that test the waters.
All right.
Better look around. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Isaac. Isaac from Pittsburgh with a tip in on the MLS referee situation. MLS, you can do better. That's apparently the deal. MLS referees, we're looking at replacement referees tomorrow. Really, now that you know, you're biased, but I'd be curious to know if people who aren't aware of the lockout and then we do get replacement referees, if they notice the difference. We need to run this. We need an experiment here. We need to see how many people unaware that these are different MLS referees actually notice the difference. If they don't notice the difference, then that says something about the referees we've got. If they do notice the difference, then it obviously could be worse. Obviously could be worse. All right, that's going to do it. iTunes, ratings and reviews. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Morning. What else? Anything else? It's been a great week. It's been a very good week. Thank you to our guests, Danny Carbassione, Matt Barber, and Christian Yari. We will talk to you guys on Monday. And we'll have MLS games to talk about. Fun times. See ya. Bye.